For many folks, keeping a close eye on health and science news, especially around weight management, it can feel like, well, a lot to keep up with.
It really can, a constant stream of information.
So today we want to cut through some of that noise. We're going to really try and understand a pretty significant development.
You're talking about the Pfizer news?
Exactly. The recent announcement about their experimental daily weight loss pill, Danuglipron. We want to unpack what happened, without getting totally bogged down in the technical weeds.
Right. A deep dive into why Pfizer decided to halt the development of this once daily oral GLP-1. It definitely raises questions for people looking at or using weight management therapies.
Absolutely. So our goal here is, first, understand the why behind Pfizer's decision. Then figure out what this means for the booming market for these GLP-1 drugs.
And also, what else might be coming down the pipeline? What other options are potentially on the horizon?
Yeah. We've been looking at various news articles covering this, trying to pull together the key insights for you.
And it's important to remember the context, right? There's just massive interest in GLP-1 drugs for weight loss currently.
Huge interest.
And these drugs, as many listeners probably know, they work by mimicking hormones our gut naturally produces.
Specifically, glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1.
Exactly, which helps regulate appetite, blood sugar. It even slows stomach emptying. And for many patients, the results have been really significant.
Okay, so let's dive right into the Pfizer announcement itself. The big headline: they've stopped development of Danuglipron, their once-daily oral pill.
That's the news.
What was the primary driver for that decision?
Well, the main reason reported was a liver injury observed in a single patient during one of the clinical trials.
Okay, a single patient.
Yes, and it was identified as potentially linked to the drug itself.
A liver injury.
Mm-hmm.
That naturally sounds quite serious, but I think the reports mentioned some mitigating details.
They did, and that's really important context. The available information suggests the patient's liver enzyme levels, those markers we look at for liver function, they actually return to normal pretty quickly after stopping the drug.
Okay, that's good.
And apparently the patient didn't have any symptoms related to this temporary enzyme elevation. No jaundice, no sickness.
So elevated liver enzymes can signal potential stress or damage to liver cells.
Yeah.
And monitoring these is obviously standard practice in drug development.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Drug developers, regulators, everyone's incredibly vigilant about liver safety, especially for drugs intended for potentially millions of people.
And wasn't there something about the dosing in this specific trial?
Yes, that's another key point. This happened in a trial arm where the dose of danuglipron was increased quite rapidly.
Oh, okay.
So it's, possible that the speed of that dose escalation might have played a role in how this individual's liver responded.
Interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
So was it just this one event, or did Pfizer indicate a broader assessment led to stopping the program?
It sounds like it was broader. Their official statement mentioned the decision came after reviewing the totality of information,
Okay.
which implies looking at all the clinical data gathered so far, efficacy, safety across all participants, plus recent feedback from regulatory agencies.
So a comprehensive risk-benefit analysis, essentially?
Exactly, taking everything into account.
And Pfizer's chief scientific officer, Dr. Chris Boshoff, weighed in too. What did he say?
Well, he expressed disappointment, naturally, about having to stop danuglipron's development.
Understandable.
But he also stressed that Pfizer is still very much committed to developing innovative medicines. They're continuing to push forward with other potential weight loss treatments in their pipeline.
Right. Still, this has to be seen as a setback for Pfizer, doesn't it? Especially in their efforts to get into this incredibly competitive GLP-1 market.
Oh, definitely a setback. The market right now is, intense.
Dominated by the injectables, right?
Primarily, yes. You've got Eli Lilly with Zepbound and Mounjaro, those target GLP-1 and another hormone, GIP. And then Novo Nordisk with Wegovy and Ozempic, which are GLP-1 focused.
And these weekly shots have really changed the game for a lot of patients managing chronic weight issues.
They really have demonstrated significant weight loss.
And the sort of holy grail for many companies seems to be getting an effective oral version, a pill.
Absolutely. A daily pill is just more convenient for many people, easier to take consistently than an injection.
So there's this big race among drug makers, Pfizer included, obviously, to develop safe and effective oral GLP-1s.
A very active race. Succeeding there would be a huge advantage commercially and for patient access.
So this danuglipron news means Pfizer is, further behind its rivals in that specific race for an oral GLP-1 for weight loss.
That seems like a fair assessment, yes. While they were working on danuglipron, other companies have moved their own oral candidates further along, or they're exploring different types of weight loss drugs altogether.
And the potential market size we're talking about here is just staggering, isn't it?
It really is. Analysts are projecting the whole GLP-1 agonist market could top maybe $150 billion a year by the early 2030s.
Right.
And within that, oral GLP-1s alone could potentially capture around $50 billion of that market share. It shows the huge commercial interest, but also the potential to help a vast number of patients.
Now, zooming back in on danuglipron, this wasn't the very first hurdle Pfizer faced with this specific drug, was it?
No, it wasn't. You might remember back in December 2023, they actually stopped development of a twice-daily formulation of danuglipron.
Oh, right. Why was that?
That was mainly due to tolerability issues in a mid-stage study. Basically, too many participants were experiencing side effects like nausea or vomiting that made it hard to stick with the treatment.
Okay, so they stopped the twice daily, but seemed pretty optimistic about this once daily version, at least for a while.
Yeah.
I remember reports from last summer.
Yeah, that's true. Despite the issues with the twice daily, they sounded hopeful about the once daily form. Back in July, they announced plans for more studies, looking at different doses later in the year.
Suggesting they thought they could find that sweet spot, the right balance of efficacy and fewer side effects.
Exactly, finding a dose that worked well enough without causing intolerable side effects.
And even with this latest decision to stop the once daily, Pfizer did mention some kind of positive underlying data from the recent studies.
They did. They indicated that those studies actually met their main goals.
Oh.
Yeah, they apparently identified a specific formulation and dose of the once-daily pill that showed potential for, quote, competitive efficacy and tolerability in larger later-stage trials.
Based on data from quite a few patients too, right?
Yes, based on safety data from over 1,400 participants across those studies.
So that's fascinating. The drug seemed potentially effective, potentially tolerable for many. But this single liver safety signal was enough to halt everything.
It really underscores how critical safety is in drug development, utterly paramount.
Yeah.
Even if a drug looks promising in terms of working, any significant safety red flag has to be taken extremely seriously and weighed against the benefits. Patient safety comes first.
And we should also remember, Pfizer had another setback with a different oral obesity pill just before this, correct?
Yeah.
Also related to liver enzymes.
You're right. That was in June 2023. They stopped development of another once-daily oral candidate.
Same reason.
Elevated liver enzymes observed in some participants in a mid-stage trial, yes. So that previous experience likely added to investor concerns this time around.
Understandably. So, okay, danuglipron is off the table now. What's next for Pfizer in the weight management space? Are they pivoting away or doubling down elsewhere?
Oh, they're definitely not pivoting away. They seem very much still in the game, but they're redirecting resources to other experimental drugs in their pipeline.
Drugs that work differently.
Yes, compounds targeting different biological pathways than danuglipron's GLP-1 focus.
Can you give us a sense of what those other approaches look like?
Sure. One key candidate is an oral drug targeting a different gut hormone receptor called GIPR.
GIPR, that's the glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide receptor.
That's the one. This drug moved into phase 2 trials last year, so it's being tested for efficacy and safety in more people.
Okay, anything else?
They also have another once-daily oral GLP-1 agonist, different from danuglipron, that's currently in phase 1 trials.
Phase 1's very early stage, focused mainly on safety and how the body handles the drug.
Exactly. Initial human testing.
And Pfizer seems somewhat optimistic about this GIPR approach specifically.
Yeah.
I think I saw some comments suggesting potential advantages.
Yes. Their former chief scientific officer, Michael Dolston, suggested that drugs targeting GIPR might potentially offer even better weight loss and be easier for patients to tolerate compared to GLP-1 only drugs.
Like danuglipron or Wegovy and Ozempic.
Correct. And it's interesting because Lilly's Zepbound and Mounjaro target both GLP-1 and GIP, and they've shown really impressive results.
So let me make sure I have this straight. Danuglipron was GLP-1 only, like Wegovy. Zepbound hits GLP-1 and GIP, and now Pfizer's exploring a GIPR-only target.
As well as another different GLP-1 only drug in early stages, yes.
Okay, so they're exploring multiple angles.
It reflects a broader industry trend, really, exploring various pathways to find the most effective and safest obesity treatments.
And we should probably mention the only currently approved oral GLP-1, right?
Yeah.
Rybelsus.
Good point. Novo Nordisk's Rybelsus. It's approved specifically for type 2 diabetes, not weight loss primarily.
But it does have some weight-lowering effects.
It does, and it's had significant sales. It definitely shows there's a market demand for oral GLP-1s, even if initially approved for diabetes.
And all this is happening while Pfizer, as a whole company, is kind of recalibrating, isn't it?
That's right. The timing is interesting. They're navigating the post-COVID revenue decline.
Looking for new growth drivers.
Exactly. And they've publicly identified oncology, cancer drugs, and obesity treatments as key focus areas for future growth.
So these setbacks in the oral weight loss space highlight with the inherent challenges and risks in pharma R&D, even for a giant like Pfizer.
Absolutely. It's a tough business with high stakes.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the main point for listeners. The key takeaway is Pfizer has stopped development of its daily oral weight loss pill, Danuglipron.
Yes, primarily due to a liver safety signal found in one patient during testing.
And this really underscores the incredibly high safety bar that any new weight management drug has to clear before it can reach patients.
Perfectly put. And it's vital for people to understand this is just one development in a field that's changing incredibly fast.
Right. Science is always moving forward.
And many companies, Pfizer included, are still heavily investing in finding new therapies. The goal remains to provide patients with better, safer, and more convenient options for managing weight and improving their health long term.
So even though this specific drug, Danuglipron, won't be moving forward, the overall effort continues. Pfizer and others are still committed, exploring different scientific routes.
The R&D pipeline is still very active. We should expect to see more new successes and, inevitably, more setbacks in the coming years.
Definitely. The search for innovative therapies that can safely help people manage weight and reduce health risks is ongoing.
Absolutely.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners to ponder. Given the huge demand we see for these GLP-1 drugs, the massive market potential, but also these ongoing development challenges, and now the exploration of new targets like GIPR, how might all these experiences, these setbacks and new approaches, ultimately shape what weight management actually looks like for patients in the future?
It's a great question, thinking about that balance.
Exactly. That balance between how well a drug works, how easy it is to take like a pill versus a shot, and crucially, its long-term safety profile.
It's a complex equation.
It really is. It's a fascinating and critically important area to watch, and we'll definitely keep bringing you updates on major developments right here on The Deep Dive.